Hi, and thanks for checking out Next Level Carpentry. I'm going to title this video, The Care and Feeding of a DeWalt DW735 Thickness Planer. I'm filming for another video that you'll see where I'll put a wide custom cove on these panels for some boxed newels on a stairway. But because these panels are so wide, I want them to come out nice and flat and smooth to minimize sanding. First, I'm going to change the knives in the DW735 thickness planer. So I'll shoot a little video of that you'll probably see uploaded before 2 or 3 videos showing building these box newel posts. And these videos are an effort to kind of streamline the video production process so I can get more content uploaded without stressing about all the finer points of doing videos, which always slows me down. So it's kind of an experiment. Let me know in the comments what you think, and we'll go from there. Let's get to work. Well, here goes. Let's call this the care and feeding of a DeWalt DW735 thickness planer. And I've got this beast mounted on a steel stand that I made. Makes it portable in the shop. I've got this dust gathering attachment that you used to be able to buy with the planer, and they quit selling some years back. It's a great feature, but I guess you can't even get them anymore. The last one I got on eBay. But whenever I'm maintaining power tools, I like to use compressed air. It really speeds things up. And you can get all this stuff done without compressed air. It just makes it faster. Otherwise, you might have to use a brush. Just move the camera in close like that to get a shot of the action. The DW735 comes with its own Torx wrench for all these screws. But because there's so many, I like to just take a Torx tip, my little impact driver, because it really speeds things up. Of course, the machine is unplugged. I slip this cover off. And DeWalt has installed this little safety here. This is the lock. This little switch is what locks the machine in the off position. There's this tab underneath here that slips down in there, and the power switch won't work even if it's plugged in when this tab is pushed down in that hole to hold that metal tab down. And we'll give this a puff of air to dust out this. Hopefully that doesn't all end up on the lens of the camera. You can see I've got a special plastic tag in here. And I use that to log when I switch the blades. Made that little tab and I just screw it right inside the machine. The last time I did these was August 9th of 2017. And today it is January 13th of 2018. So it's about time for a change of blades. The 3 long red bolts, if you want to call them that, are what holds the cover over the cutter head. Nice design feature by DeWalt. Once those 3 are taken out, you lift this cutter head, or lift this dust shroud up and pull it off, and that exposes the business end of the machine. This isn't too crusty. Running wood through like pine that has a lot of pitch in it will stick onto these parts in here. You probably already know it, but on this planer the knives are 2-sided, and on my log here I keep track of the sides, and what's in here is the second side on the 3rd set of knives that I've had in this planer. So rather than flipping the knives edge for edge on this change out, I'll be installing a new set of blades on their first side. And getting a 2-pack of these is a great value. It's just crazy cheap. I think it ends up $22 for one side, and the amount of work that this planer saves pays for that 22 bucks in no time. So the knives in here are razor sharp. They're a little less than razor sharp right now because that's why I'm changing them. But there's a detent in here. This little plate is what keeps the cutter head from spinning when this is opened up. But I want to make sure one of the 3 cutter head sides is facing up. I'll blow those screw heads out just to make sure there's nothing in them. And I switched the Torx driver bit to this long extension so that I can pull these screws out real easily. Make sure that that Torx bit is square in those screw heads, because if you strip one of those out, they're a bugger to get out of there. It's just a quick zip of the gun to get these out. And out of force of habit, I start on the outside end and go towards the middle, but I don't think that's really essential for this particular tool. I do use the blade wrench for this. It's got 2 strong magnets in there, and I can lift this blade keeper off of there, set it aside, and in this case I'm replacing the blade, so I'll just get rid of this. And you can see how there's a blue line on one edge and a red line on the other edge. That's how I mark the knives, to make sure that I'm always putting the sharp edge out and the dull edge in when flipping them in the middle. On the cutter head, one edge of this cutter head that's under the knife is called the chip breaker, this little rounded slot, and that edge of the chip breaker is almost as sharp as the knife, so don't cut your finger on that either. I didn't blow the dust out of those screws. It's really fine powder, but it's real important to make sure that Torx tip is down and square in those screws, because they strip out real easy. One screw wants to escape. Lift the retainer bar, remove the knife. Even though these knives are too dull to leave the finish I want on those wide birch boards, they're still plenty sharp enough to lacerate you, so be careful. Push this retainer down to rotate the cutter head. The DeWalt planer initially had a regular hex head bolt for these, and the screw heads were pretty soft. So if you have an older model planer that doesn't have the Torx tip but has those hex heads, you got to be extra careful to not strip them out. It's a good idea to have a few spares around, so that if you strip them getting them out, you can replace it with a new one going back in. So once I've got the knives out, blow any loose dust out of there, and on these interior surfaces, this throat where the cutter head is, that'll build up with pitch. So I'll use a laminate sample chip, scrape down in there. If it's real gummy, I'll use that CMT blade and bit cleaner to loosen up that crud, because I want those chips to flow smoothly out of the throat here and off into the dust bag. In this case, it's actually pretty clean. Use a rag or a paper towel to kind of clean things up. And it's important that the cutter head itself is clean. Don't want any goo or chips on the surface of this cutter head to deflect the knife and make for an imperfect cut. And then this little channel here right under the chip breaker, that needs to be clean too. If it's got gum and pitch in there, scrape it out. I used a rounded corner of a laminate chip. In another video I show how to cut a sharp angle on one end of these, but that rounded corner is good for cleaning out that little groove. Sometimes I'll use a little bit of lacquer thinner to wash this off. All depends on what I've been planing and how long it's been in between. Same thing goes for the knife retainer plates. Make sure they're clean, free of gum and pitch. These pieces have crisp edges, but not to the point where they're going to send you to OR or ER, as it were. Once I've got that all cleaned up, I like to give the whole thing a nice bath of silicone spray, because it helps so much for cleanup next time. And this liquid wrench can, boy, it really comes out of there. Some of them come out, it's more of a mist like spray paint. I really like how much of that comes out. And these chip breaker retainer pieces, I'll give them a spritz of silicone too. And wipe them off with that rag. I'm being careful here too. A lot of sharp edges in there, a lot of things that can slice your fingers, so be careful. There's a chain that runs around in here and that coordinates the lift mechanism on all 4 of those posts. So I like to run it once around and blow with compressed air to get the dust and crust out of there. And then I take a mountain bike bicycle chain lube with this long dribbler nozzle on it and take a lap around with that too. Silicone would be good here, but not 3-in-1 oil. Just want something that's pretty lightweight so that it lubes the chain without being so sticky that it comes up with every molecule of dust that blows by. And I'm raising this cutter head up on purpose in the process so I can wax the bed later. And that puts that in pretty fine shape. If the dust collector shroud is a mess, I'll take one of those sharpened Formica chips and try to clean the junk off of this. This is pretty soft plastic, but the cleaner it is, the smoother the exit path for the chips are, whatever. I must have been running some really pitchy pine through there to make that such a mess. And despite the silicone I sprayed on this last time, that stuff stuck. I'm going to have to take it up a notch for cleaning that off. First thing I'm going to try is a little bit of lacquer thinner on a paper towel. Lacquer thinner is a little harsh, but it's not melting the plastic, so I'm going to get the rest of that off of there. That is actually melting the plastic a little bit, so I'm not going to use that anymore. Note to self, use something like blade and bit cleaner next time. It might be a little slower, but it's sustainable for keeping the plastic clean. Once the piece is cleaned up, I'll give it a spritz of silicone spray. This piece does have little Phillips screws in it. If it got really gummy inside, I'd open up the 2 halves and clean it out good inside, but that's going to be plenty good. And I get a little bit excessive with this next step. Pay heed to the caution. Edges are sharp. Don't cut your pinkies. And I don't want to rub the edges against each other either. I can stick the old blades in the container for proper disposal. And for the price of new ones, I don't think you can sharpen the old ones. I will use lacquer thinner on the blades to remove all the oil from them. This is the top side with the cutting edges down. They have a little bit of oil on them from the manufacturer so they don't rust in the package, which is a good idea. I'll carefully flip them over and even more carefully wipe the oil off the back side. If you do get cut on these, the doctor will appreciate that it's a nice clean cut. It'll be real easy to stitch together for you. Use a dry paper towel to finish cleaning these. There's a little diamond in the middle of the blade. All the diamonds are pointing that way. So I'm going to color one edge of this green, just an arbitrary color. And I'll make the other side red. It's like I got the blades for Christmas. This just helps me keep track of the blades and the sides. The last edges were 3 and 4, so this will be 5 and 6. And I suppose a younger person wouldn't have to go to such lengths to remember which edge is which. So back over here at the thickness planer, I just write on this side shift, and I'll just go this direction so that when I install the blade and I'm putting the red edge, which is number 5, towards the chip breaker, you can see that these blades have a short slot in them and a small peg. So there's a slot in the blade and a peg on the cutter head. So when the knife is dropped in there, I want to shift all 3 knives this direction. That way in the future, if I'm planing and I get a bad chip in one of the knives, I can open this up and shift one of the knives that way, and then the chip gets offset out of the planing pass. So I want to start them all on this side, and then I can shift them later to clean up nicks. Keep it shifted that direction, and drop a blade keeper down on there. And then with the magnetic tip out of the drill, I can start all these screws by hand so they don't get cross-threaded. I don't want to start them off with the impact drill in case they're crooked. Last thing I need is a cross-threaded screw in that cutter head down in this machine. It takes long enough to change the blades as it is. I can reach down in and make sure that knife is still slid to the one direction. The knife is slid that way. The cover bar is just where it is, and the knife is indexed this way on those pegs, so I don't have to worry about it shifting. And I just run the screws in until the impact clicks once, starting at the center, going towards the edges. Probably doesn't matter as much in fact as it does in habit. And then I'll go back through and make sure they've all got the same torque on them. And I push this down to rotate the cutter head, now being extra careful because there's a brand new knife blade in there waiting to slice my finger. Repeat the process with those other two blades. Got all three blades replaced with edge number 5 in the being used position, and all the blades are shifted that direction for eliminating chips later on. With all that cleaned up and bolted down, double check as necessary. Everything sprayed with silicone and cleaned up. And put the dust collector shroud back on. And I updated my maintenance log. The fourth set installed January 13th, 2018. And install the screws back in their places. I like to make sure I get all three of them started before I tighten any one of them down, because that cover likes to shift around a little bit. And it can be hard to get the screws started sometimes. The roller chain is exposed a little bit more on this side. Shim the camera. Over here, this is actually a better place for dusting and oiling the chain because it's easier to see. One final dust out, all the screws are gone. That means they're all in the cutter head, everything's tightened up, ready to go. And slide the cover back into place. Start the screws by hand, tighten with the drill. The other thing I like to do at this point is to wax the platen with some paste wax. I really like this Johnson's paste wax. It's good and thick, it's got heavy body to it. Seems to last quite a while. And if you've seen my video about cleaning cast iron tabletops, I use the same process of taking a rag and using a Formica chip or a spoon. Take a glob of wax out of the can, drop it into the middle of the rag, and then push the wax into a ball where it'll seep through the cloth, and you can apply a nice heavy coat quite easily. I tried to get a good angle on the camera. If your planer platen has any pitch on it or gummy buildup, it's another time I'll take a Formica chip and scrape it clean. This one is clean right now just because of what I've been running through there. But that's the first step for this, and then just take that waxy rag, give it a nice heavy swirling coat of wax. Make sure that the cutter head is plenty high up because those blades are up here, and if you do the wrong thing the wrong way at the wrong time, you're going to lacerate your knuckles without hardly knowing you did it. And I think everybody uses the infeed and outfeed tables on this planer. If you don't, you don't recognize these, I highly recommend them. You just take my waxy rag, stick it back in the can for next time. And then I buff that wax down in a few passes as it dries. Another thing I'll point out is that if you've done everything you can to minimize snipe on your planer, but you still get some, make sure your planer platen is clean, smooth, and waxed. The harder the feed rollers have to work to push the piece through, the more snipe you'll get. The slicker this is, the less snipe you'll have. Products like dry coat and stuff are good for this also. I've kind of gravitated towards paste wax over the years. It seems to have a little more body to it, last a little bit longer, but that might be nostalgia taking over reality. Bottom line is get something on there that slicks it up nice so your work feeds smoother through the planer. When that's done, your rag should glide right through. Another maintenance item to take care of at this time when the planer head's in an all the way up position is to make sure the infeed and the outfeed roller are clean. The camera died when I did this a minute ago. There was a bunch of chips stuck to this outfeed roller, so I just took a cloth and wiped it off and then plugged the planer in and blipped the switch to get the roller to come around to the other dirty side. Unplug the machine and then wipe it off. Depending on what's stuck to the roller, you might need to use the Formica chip to clean it off. And sometimes I'll use something harsh like lacquer thinner or goof off to clean that roller and get all the pitch and stuff out of it. But sometimes the chips in those rollers can actually put an impression in the wood, but at the least it decreases the traction for pulling pieces through the planer, and they just work better when they're clean. Well, that pretty well covers the blade changing process and some routine maintenance that I do on this thickness planer. It's a great machine, and with a little bit of TLC, this eliminates so much work and so much sanding that I don't know how I ever lived without one. And because I don't have an official dust collector in the shop, this dust collection bag that hooks up to the chip ejection port just does a fantastic job of putting the bulk of those shavings right into a garbage can. That really cranks down smooth. The nice lubricated chain, everything's all cleaned out. For a wide board like this, I'll switch to the slow planer speed. And I don't know if you've ever experienced it before, but when that set of knives is brand new and you run it through on the slow pass, you hit this with sandpaper and it actually makes it rougher. It's just an unbelievable finish. I think it'll show in the camera. You can see the reflection of the lights in that surface. It is absolutely flawless. Of course, until the first speck of dust or sand goes through and puts a micro nick in my blades. And as a side note, they make a helical cutter head for this machine. I've never used one, but I know that the finish from a helical cutter head isn't the same as one made with a straight, sharp knife. And while I like the helical cutter head in my joiner, because the cutters are carbide, and that thing can remove an incredible amount of material in no time, I don't want a helical cutter head on the final pass, because with a smaller diameter cutter head in this machine, the cutters make more of little scallops instead of a nice wide slice. And that's kind of a technical thing. And I think the carbide cutter head in a DW735 would be great for removing a lot of material, maybe in tough woods like hickory. But then for a finished pass, I'd always want to do it with the straight knives to minimize sanding in the end. That's just my 2 cents worth. So I guess that's a wrap for the care and feeding of a DeWalt DW735 thickness planer. I hope you found some information in there helpful. The video is going to be a little rough because I'm going to try to just package it up and get it uploaded to get the content out there without worrying about a bunch of fancy editing stuff. So I hope you found that helpful. Maybe came up with a pointer or two that will help you get better performance out of your planer and better results in your work. This is the sort of content that I want to share on Next Level Carpentry. So I hope you find it helpful enough that you'll subscribe, to keep an eye out for new stuff that comes along when I can get to it. It's probably it's probably plain to see that video production isn't my strong suit, but I hope some of the pointers from actually using this machine make it worth your while for watching the video. Now that the planer is all sharpened up, I'm going to run these wide boards through and put the cove on them for the box newel posts that I'm making. And when all the videos are done, I'll have links at the end going back and forth between the two. And in the meantime, thanks for watching.